So back in October of 2021 on my CRP channel, I posted a video, a fairly controversial video, saying that if you were living in the West, it was time to leave. This was in early October of 2021. Now, since then, of course, what has happened is that the nations of the so-called Western democracies have become more and more totalitarian. I mean, they are cracking down on their people. And in October, the trigger for that video was in fact the new law that had passed in Canada, saying that at the end of, I think it was October, but certainly by the end of November, there was like some conditions and whatnot, any Canadian or any person in Canada, be it a citizen, a legal resident, an illegal alien, whomever, could not leave Canada without having proof of vaccination. To me, that sounded just totalitarian, and also just what exactly is the point? See, if you're worried about your own country not developing a particular illness, you don't care about the people who are leaving the country now, do you? But anyway, this law was going to be, had passed and was going to be enforced certainly by the end of November of 2021, as has happened. And since then, if you are in Canada, you cannot leave unless you show proof of vaccination. But my video in October had a larger point. And the point was that all of the countries of the Western democracies were going to slide into totalitarianism. And they have. They most certainly have. As I record this video, yesterday, the Canadian Parliament passed by a majority the so-called Emergency Measures Act, which gives the government all kinds of discretionary powers in terms of essentially repressing the people. The people in Canada, if they are accused or found guilty of any crime against the government, they can, not only be arrested and thrown in jail, but their financial lives can be destroyed. I mean, their lives completely annihilated. And these emergency measures have passed. And all of a sudden, everything that Canadian citizens own no longer belongs to them, really. It belongs to the government. Because if somebody else can take something from you, then it's not really yours now, is it? It's theirs. And in this case, it's the totalitarian regime in Ottawa. And it is a totalitarian regime. Don't give me any bullshit that it's not, okay? And more to the point, it's not merely that it's happening in Canada. This is happening in Australia, New Zealand, and soon enough it's going to happen in the United States. Canada is just the bleeding edge of what's going on in all of the Western democracies. Now, this video, I basically am reiterating what I said back in October and doubling down. I mean, I've been proven to be right. The Western democracies are becoming totalitarian, and there's no way to fight it. Look at what happened to the Canadians. The Canadian people, the truckers, they organized. Thousands and thousands of truckers went to Ottawa to protest. They had legitimate grievances, and they were peaceful. They truly were peaceful protesters, not like the bullshit of those race riots back in 2020. No. This was actual peaceful protests. And after 2 weeks, the Canadian government under Justin Trudeau cracked down on the truckers, beat them to a pulp, some of them, threatened to take away their children, have shut down their bank accounts, not only of the actual protesters, but of the people who donated to the protesters, people who are related to people who donated to the protesters. I'm not kidding, this is real. This is happening right the fuck now, man. Yeah, people who are just, random people basically who have some relative who donated to the trucker convoy, and they get the hammer from the Canadian government. This is war against the people of Canada by their own government. And what are the other nations of the Western democracies saying? They're saying that it's a good thing. It's a good thing that Justin Trudeau cracked down on those nasty truckers. And it's a good thing that he demonized them and called them bigots and Nazis and all the rest of it. And by the way, the only Nazi flag that appeared in the protest, it turned out to be a false flag. It was set up by the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. Yeah, that's true. And it's circulating around, the information. It's not being broadcast by the mainstream media because the mainstream media in Canada is beholden to the government because the government pays them. Because these broadcasters can't earn a living by just selling advertisement time. And so they need a subsidy from the government. And so these broadcasters in Canada, since they need these subsidies, they say nice things about the government and never call them out on their bullshit. And so the people of Canada are being repressed by their own governments. That's what's going on. And no amount of peaceful protesting will change that. We saw it. We saw it in Canada. We saw it in Ottawa. We've seen it in Australia. Yeah, because in Australia, for instance, there was a protest in Canberra, the capital of Australia, of 1.5 million people. Do you have any idea how many people that is in Australia? Australia only has 25 million people. 1.5 million of them showed up to a protest in Canberra. Seas, oceans of people. 1.5 million people in Australia represents 6% of the population. If in the United States you had a protest with 6% of the population, that would be 20 million people descending on Washington, D.C. That's how many people protested in Canberra. And did the Australian government do anything? Did the Australian government listen to the people's complaints? No! 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 That's because the Australian government doesn't give a shit about the people. None of these governments do. Because all of these governments have become divorced from the people that they're supposed to serve. Because in the Western democracies, in liberal democracies, it's supposed to be government of the people, by the people, for the people. And the leadership class is supposed to serve the people, the best interests of the people. But the leadership class in the West no longer does that. The leadership class in the West serves itself. They are no different from Putin or Xi. Well, not even that, because at least Xi Jinping in China, he actually cares about the Chinese people. And Vladimir Putin, he might be the next incarnation of Hitler, but he actually cares about Russian people. Ethnic Russian people are his priority. But the leadership classes in the Western democracies, they don't care about the people. They kind of hate the people. All they care about is money for themselves and money for their real constituents, which are the rich people, the oligarchs. That's what's going on in the West. Our leadership classes no longer want to serve the people. They want to serve themselves, and they are willing to put the jackboot on our collective faces so that people like Bill Gates, like George Soros, like Jeffrey Epstein and the other versions of Jeffrey Epstein that are out there, so that they can all play their little games and make their money and milk us like fucking cows until we are no longer able to be milked, and then we are sent to the slaughter. And always with repression. That's what's going on today. And so I'm telling you, leave the West now. I am in Kharkov, Ukraine, fucking 25 miles from the Russian border. And I feel safer and more free than if I were in Los Angeles or New York or San Francisco or Berlin or Vienna or Amsterdam. Places that I know intimately have become prisons. And here, in the ass end of Europe, I'm actually free. And there are other such places. And they are always in underdeveloped places. Underdeveloped shitholes, quite frankly. Because, I mean, Kharkov, lovely people, and lots of areas of the city that are lovely, but it's basically poor. It's a poor city in a poor country. And that's why they leave you alone. You have to leave the West. Now! I mean, I told you back in fucking October. And if you were a Canadian bro, well, it's too late now, isn't it? You're stuck there. And you're going to be stuck there forever. Because there's no opposition. That's the key issue. Nobody wants to oppose these totalitarians. The so-called conservatives are fucking weaklings. The conservative parties across the board, they are the same people as the totalitarians. They come from the same schools, the same clubs. They know each other. They intermarry. It's all part of a club, and you're not a member, like George Carlin very famously said. Yeah. And so What are you going to do? Are you going to fight? You can't fight because you can't win. The truckers, thousands of truckers for 2 weeks, and it took them just one day to crack down and wipe them out. And in Canberra, 6% of the population showed up. And what happened? Nothing. Nothing changed. And if you really get uppity, they crack down on you with the system pigs, the so-called police, to protect and serve. Fuck that. They're not there to protect and serve you. They're there to keep you down. So for Canadian bros, it's too late for you. But for everybody else in the other countries of the Western democracies, leave! Leave now! You will never have the chance again. And if you say one fucking thing that goes against their narrative, they will strip you of everything. Your money, your job, your ability to speak your mind, everything will be taken from you. You will become nothing, a living, walking dead man. Leave now while you can. For you Canadian bros, it's too late. But you American bros and Brit bros and all the rest of you, get out. Go to a poor country. A poor country where there's some semblance of freedom. A poor country that's so poor that they can't bother to persecute anybody because they got problems of their own. Go there. Go to Africa. Go to Paraguay. Or Brazil. There are lots of places in Brazil where you can get lost and nobody's going to hassle you. Paraguay is a fucking shithole. I know this. I'm Latin American. Paraguay is so fucking poor that they're never going to bother you about fucking anything. And Africa, that whole fucking continent, except for South Africa, because if you go to South Africa and you're a white man, you're going to get eventually killed. But every other country in Africa, Kenya, Nigeria, all of it, go anywhere. They won't hassle you. But in the Western democracies, you're fucked. I'm sorry I'm being so black-pilled, but it's the truth, man. It's the truth. And you gotta face the truth, whether you like it or not. And you gotta face the reality of whether you can fight something or you just gotta run away. And what you gotta do here is you gotta run away because there's no way to fight these people. They won, okay? They have won. And right now, all of this is just the mopping up operation.